Welcome to Christian Reacts, where I react to Christian content online that affects the modern world and the sins that affect all of us. This video is titled, An Orthodox Priest's Advice for Anxiety and Depression.
Yeah, the question of anxiety and depression it's so massive today. Everyone feels alienated, and so many people really struggle with this. And I think this is one of the paradoxes of this world of psychology that has now kind of had a boom in the past 100, 120, 130 years. While psychology has helped us to understand ourselves better, in many ways it's actually done just as much damage as good. And I think the main way that it's done damage to us is it's caused us to believe that however we feel and whatever we think is really important, and that we need to think more about ourselves. And really, the more you think about yourself, the higher degree of anxiety and depression you're going to have.
This is really interesting. And I think the more that you think about yourself, it's very fascinating, because as Christians, we're called to deny ourselves. We're called to lift up the cross and deny ourselves, meaning deny our desires to sin. And I think with the topic of psychology, it's almost the opposite in a way. You're kind of taught to constantly be in your head and constantly think through every type of emotion that you're dealing with all the time. Now, I'm not saying you should not be emotionally literate. Of course not. You should always be in touch with your emotions. You should always have a sense of who you are, how you react to certain things in your life. And if there's someone with BPD or bipolar disorder or like major disorders, then of course I support treatment of that. Absolutely. But I'm curious to see Father Paul Trubinek's perspective on this.
The way to stop having anxiety and depression is to stop living in your own head and stop thinking about yourself so much and stop relying on yourself so much. So whenever I have parishioners who come to me struggling with a lot of depression and anxiety, I usually give them a little list of things to do. And the list isn't all that complex. The first thing I tell them to do is to go exercise. I tell them to do that actually first. Exercise at least 30 minutes a day, pretty vigorously. Science has shown us that 30 minutes of vigorous exercise a day is as good as or better than almost every single medication there is for depression on the market.
This is such... Oh my gosh, I can't. This is excellent advice. This is excellent. I can't tell you how many times I felt sad or depressed during certain episodes of my life when I was younger, back in college, and I was on a team, and I would be all stressed and upset about schoolwork and my grades and all this stuff. But when I would go to practice, and I would exercise my muscles from head to toe, and I was a runner, so I would be doing a lot of running, and it's almost as if my brain just kind of relaxes then. It's like wow, you know, your heart rate goes up, and it's an unreal experience. And it's a great antidote to the emotional stress that you deal during a day-to-day life.
Just getting out of your own head and getting the blood pumping and flowing is a really good thing. Number two, I typically tell them to go build, fix, or clean something, which means do something where you can see the results of your own work. You know, if you don't know plumbing and you have a sink that's broken, go buy a book and learn how to fix it. And it may be a frustrating experience, but that feeling of, that sense of accomplishment when you look at the fact that you fix something is a big deal. But even if you can't do that, especially if you're married, go clean a room. Go clean a room, so much so if you're a man, so that your wife walks in and is stunned and so pleased. Declutter is a big part of that. Declutter and clean, but do something where you can see the results. Number three.
This is a really good point also. I think decluttering is part of your mind too. It really helps your mind to clean up your space. In fact, I need help. I probably need to clean my room, to be completely honest with you. But yes, like keeping a clean space and is not only good for your spouse, but also it's good for you. And learning a skill, building confidence off skill. So when I started making videos in the beginning, I was super stressed with what I was doing. I was like, I don't know how to hold a camera correctly, or I don't know how to find audio that records on the computer and of course my voice both clearly and convincingly. And yet when I learned how to do that on YouTube, and I learned how to research these topics and accomplish the goals that I had set in mind, I was impressed and I felt much better about myself. Now, obviously, I'm not saying you need to go build the Eiffel Tower or anything too drastic, but basic things. You gain confidence in yourself when you learn basic skills. I think this is very important.
Go pray, again, at least half an hour. Go pray, preferably the Jesus prayer is a good way to do it. If you're really in a lot of despair, the Psalms can be very helpful, but go pray. And when you pray, make sure that prayer is really an encounter. Don't just go read the prayers. Don't go say the prayers, pray the prayers, really be with Christ. And then number 4, find something, again, if you're married for your spouse, but if not, for someone else, find something that you can do that's really meaningful for someone else. Go live for someone else. You've lived for Christ in prayer. Now go live for your neighbor, your spouse, your family member, whoever it is. If you do those 4 things, this
is really important. Having time for intentional prayer. This is something that I struggle with also. I think many Christians, including myself, we have a sense of rushing through prayer or just saying a prayer before eating. And of course, praying before eating is a fantastic idea, but it's very rushed and it's very trivial if you just do it before a meal only in your life, or just when you wake up and you say a brief prayer for a minute or two and then you're on your phone watching a video for 15 to 20 minutes. Listen, I've been there. I'm not coming at anybody with an entitlement mindset at all, because we've all been there. So yeah, I think intentional prayer is very important, and that's something that in our modern culture is never discussed about when dealing with anxiety or depression. But in the Bible, God says, ask and knock on the door, and the door will be open for you. And I think this goes this relates to so many things.
My typical advice to again, it's typically men who come to me with this issue. I tell them, do those 4 things. Exercise for half an hour. Do something that cleans or fixes or repairs or builds something that you can see. Pray for half an hour. And go do something meaningful for someone else. And then I tell them, once you've done those 4 things, then go ahead, go sit on your couch and be as depressed as you want to be. And they always laugh when I say that, because they know. Before even practicing it, they know, well, if I do those 4 things, I don't think I'm going to be so depressed. Exactly. You're not going to be so depressed. You're living for Christ, you're living for others, and you're not so in your own head. I think this concept of self-love is really destructive. When Christ says, love your neighbor as yourself, a lot of people will interpret that and say, see, you can't love others unless you love yourself first. I don't think that's really what Christ was calling us to, though. I think the way that he's calling us to that, and I've looked at a lot of patristic commentaries, I have yet to find a father who talks about how we need to love ourselves first. They usually focus on
This is a really interesting point right here. Very interesting.
The other part, that we should love others. How much do we love ourselves? We love ourselves so much so that we do things for ourselves without even thinking about it. You don't have to remind yourself every day, I better feed my body because I want to keep going. I better give myself rest. I better go brush my teeth and wash. You don't really have to think about those things. They're just automatic. They become thoughtless. I think that's the type of self-love that we want. The one that doesn't really think of itself. But as for like an active loving of yourself, I really don't think that that's consistent with the Christian message. The Christian message is, if you want to be fulfilled, forget yourself. And in fact, Saint Silouan and Saint Sophrony talk about loving Christ so much that to the world it looks like self-hatred. So largely what asceticism is.
It's very interesting, and I think not only I don't know that much about the saints because I'm not practicing Orthodox Christian. I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Christ, more in the Protestant faith, but not or the Protestant side, I'd say, but not really the Orthodox side. But that's a really good point, because the Bible calls us to when you're rich, sell everything, get rid of your wealth. Not sell, but give it away, give to the poor, give to the needy, and you'll inherit the kingdom of God. And in the world, this looks crazy. It's like you work so hard and you want to have this luxury car, this fancy apartment, all these things, and yet these are the rewards of the world. And yet, from the worldly perspective, it's like, what are you doing getting rid of all these things? But that's what God calls us to do. And that's why so many people feel good when they volunteer. They feel very good when they give. Like, so they show that when you give to people, usually you feel really good. And there's a reason behind that, because God designed us to be like that, in that way.
Is we afflict the body, not because we're anti-body, and not because we hate ourselves, but because we love Christ so much, we love our neighbor so much, that we really don't give ourselves any thought. So what's the way to be fulfilled? Empty yourself. And it's really key that people understand this. Humility is not hating yourself, it's not looking down on yourself, it's not beating yourself up, it's not afflicting yourself. Humility is to empty yourself. It's a big theme I talk quite a bit about, and that's that the point of Christianity and Orthodoxy is not to be a good Christian. You're never going to be a good Christian in many ways. Christ promised that. No one is good but God alone. The point is to be an empty Christian. If you can empty yourself out of egoism, which is where a lot of this self-love movement comes from, if you empty yourself out of egoism, then suddenly your heart becomes an empty vessel that can be filled with the grace of God. And that's what makes man fulfilled.
Wow. That's really powerful. If you enjoyed this clip, please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening.